Yeah, Deborah mentions the French existentialist philosopher Albert Camus, who is very impressive because his thoughtful, human a way of addressing the existentialist dilemma of being moral in a ultimately amoral or immoral world. Amoral because after the wars in the 20th century, it is that much more difficult to believe in a good God unless you look at it through the biblical perspective and see that God did not create the atrocities and did not want them, and they're not part of the plan of God, but they occurred, and that God is grieved. But because of the philosophical influence on the culture, and because of the failure of much of the church to separate history from, that is, human choices and events, from the directives God's word gives. In other words, the church saw in history somehow the manifestation of God, very Hegelian. It became more and more difficult in the 20th century for people to read the Bible as a book of information and as clarifying the issue. And so it was, humanly speaking, impossible for Camus to come to that. And yet, rather than following Sartre's direction of being the existentialist who sets himself up as the arbiter of truth and imposes his critique only from himself, Camus is very much aware of the fact that we live in a moral universe. We must somehow live in a moral universe. He writes about this in a letter to a German friend in which he says, what Hitler does and what the Nazis did in France was so evil that it cannot one cannot just have it happen. It will have to be judged. Someday there will be a judgment. And he writes this play, Les Justes, The Just Assassins. It's in a collection of Camus' plays that you find. There are 5 plays in the little book. The Myth of Sisyphus and Caligula. Actually, the main title of the book is Caligula, but there are 5 plays, among them The Just Assassins. And in this book, it's the story of a group of anarchists in Russia in 1905, 1906, when Russia was just beginning to democratize and have its first parliament. The anarchists wanted to kill the ruler, the Archduke, and get ready to throw the bomb. And as the carriage rolls by, the bomb thrower, who declared himself willing to throw the bomb, notices that there are the 2 children of the Archduke in the carriage. And so, on the spur of the moment, he decides not to throw the bomb. That is to give up the whole revolution they had planned for the sake of saving these 2 little people, these 2 children. They're innocent, they're children. And everybody, of course, gets in his group gets mad at him because he abandoned the cause for human beings. And you see in there this tremendous passion of Camus for what is right rather than what is ideologically justified. The immediate situation is more important than the end to which they wanted to throw the bomb. When we've always said about the Jesuits that the end justifies the means, this is a statement: the means are the only thing you have at hand, and that's what you need to consider. The end will come one way or another. You may have a second chance or whatever, but you don't pursue the end by disregarding the means. The means are the more important thing, and that's what I tried to say at the end of my presentation tonight, that what you have only ever is this situation. Are you now just, loving, fair, kind, compassionate, considerate in the situation in which we live? Never mind the end. It's just the same as, I never understood the question Christians tend to ask, some Christians tend to ask, where would you spend eternity? Well, isn't it more important to figure out whether there is a God and what kind of a God there is before you ask that question? Because maybe you don't want to spend eternity with a God that turns out to be wicked or indifferent or whatever. And so the immediate situation is far more important to address, and that's what Camus describes so well in this short little play, The Just Assassins. Then in relationship to the war in Algeria, he grappled with that because he was born in Algeria. And as you remember, there was the liberation war of Algeria's independence in the 50s and 60s that ended then with the peace in Evian in 61, I think it was. And the question that he grapples with in that discussion, one of the questions is, you know, if it's a matter of...
you have to tell the context. Because he was born in Algeria and became a member of the Communist Party to fight for the rights of the Arabs, and he was very involved with that. His father died, he was a soldier, died in the French Algerians, but he always felt very much that the Algerians were very mistreated. Then he came to France, which he always hated France, but hated Europe, cold and miserable. He longed for the Mediterranean culture. He never went back, and he had his immediate family was there, his mother and so forth. And so he left the Communist Party when he became, which was one of the big things that separated him from Sartre as well, because Sartre became not only a communist, but he became a moralist later. So Camus was really someone who, when he saw that he was wrong, and that communism was not what they thought it was, and he saw what was happening, so that he left the party. And very early on, before anybody else did, I mean later people did, and he left very, very early on. And before the war, very early on. So then he received the literature Nobel Prize and it was at that moment in Stockholm, so that was very late down the road in 1960, that he was speaking at Stockholm University to students, and someone asked him about, being Algerian, because he knew he was Algerian, and what was he doing about it. And of course he was doing lots of things, you see, behind the scene, but he did not think it was useful or helpful for him to be, as it were, a sort of a public intellectual standing up, proclaiming things. He said it's a very complicated situation, and he realized he could endanger people's lives, he could make things worse by speaking up. So though he was doing a lot of things behind the scene, he didn't really drag into making big public statements at the university in Stockholm. So this person heckled him, and finally he said something which then was quoted around the world over and over again, both for and against him. And that is, he said, if I had to choose between the revolution and my mother, I would always choose my mother. And it was misquoted, but it was very much what he was just lecturing. And that is, not that he, people said, it shows he doesn't really care, it's only his personal life that matters. That's not at all the point. The point was, if I'm in a situation where my mother is in danger, I would have to save her life. That is what I would have to do, just like he had said in his play, "Es juste." You can't go killing Jews and children for the sake of an idea of a perfect Russia in the future. So.
Could you say a little bit more about abortion, which is so controversial today? You seem to be a strong defender of the rights of the unborn child based on what you call the medical facts. I guess my question is, given your statements, do you think there's ever any justification for abortion, ever? For example, based on other parties other than the child, the mother who might lose her life, for example, giving birth, or other parties involved, the father?
Absolutely, yeah.